Hi, my name is Cottrell-Boyce. I'm a children's author and a screenwriter and professor of reading at Hope University, Liverpool. Probably most celebrated for helping create the 2012 Olympic opening ceremony. And I'm very passionate about getting children to read, and therefore I'm very proud, honoured and excited about being involved in Essex's Year of Reading, the aim of which is to get every child reading confidently. And I want to get behind that message because I think reading confidently is obviously the key to reading for pleasure. And I truly believe that reading for pleasure is a kind of magic bullet for children. It helps enormously with education and attainment, but more importantly, with well-being and happiness, which I think if we've learned anything over the last 2 years, it's learning that resilience and the ability to find happiness in your life is hugely important. It's the inoculation, it's the vaccine against all the bad things that might be going to happen. I want to tell you a story about why I became a children's writer, which is a story also about why I think children's books are essential and reading for pleasure is essential. I was working on a film a long time ago, set during the war in the Balkans, the war in the former Yugoslavia. And we shot that film just after the fall of Sarajevo, and I saw the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of a terrible war. Part of that aftermath was ethnic cleansing. And I saw children from orphanages and orphan children being kind of divvied up among the different ethnic groups as part of the ethnic cleansing operation. I became very interested in this idea of children being kind of moved around as bargaining chips. You probably already know the story of how First Nation children in Australia were often taken into care on the grounds that they had very little chance of growing up as good Australian citizens if they were being brought up by Aboriginal people. So they were taken into care on the smallest of grounds and brought up to be good Australians. So I became very interested in this story, and I met a woman called Marielle, who's quite a distinguished Swiss-German writer who'd written about these things. And the reason that she'd written about these things is that she herself was a Roma gypsy who'd been taken into care as a child for exactly the same reasons. The idea that the state did not believe that Roma gypsies could bring up their children properly. So she was brought up in this icy, regimented institution. And she really kicked against it. She was very rebellious. She was moved to 13 different borsals. She did a spell in prison. She narrowly missed having a lobotomy. But when I met her, she was this writer. She was incredibly articulate. She was very amenable. She was very outward looking. She wanted to help people, and she was good fun to be with. I wish I could show you a picture of her. At the end of our conversations, I asked her this question, a personal question, because I wanted to know. I said, Marielle, you were brought up in this very regimented institution from infancy, but you pushed against it. How did you know that there was more to life? How did you know that you deserved more? And how did you know that there was happiness out there? And she said, I read Heidi. And as you can see, I can't even say that today. That's the reason I became a children's writer. I was writing films at the time. I just thought, I had no idea that a book could do that a book could blow down those kind of prison walls. And as a children's writer, you're privileged to talk to meet your audience a lot. And I go into schools, and in fact, I go into prisons, and I meet children who are in a different way as imprisoned as Marielle. They're imprisoned by ideas about masculinity, about class, about aspiration, and about religion and race, all those things. And I believe that a book that is read for pleasure, read on your own terms, is dynamite that can blow those walls down, that you find yourselves in books. I think Ian Foster said, we read to know that we're not alone. So people in the most extreme circumstances can find their way out by knowing they're not alone. A funny story is that I have a blood condition which makes me change colour. That was very difficult growing up. I turned yellow, so I was brought up being called Banana Man, Custard Face, Marzipan Man, all those names were thrown at me at school. My dad read me a book that showed me that changing colour could be a superpower. He read me The Incredible Hulk, and that really empowered me. So I think reading for pleasure is a huge thing for building happiness, for building great people like the person that Marielle became. And I think the year of reading is going to do a lot to change that. I would put in a plea for the magic of reading aloud, being read to. There's something primal about being read to. I think it takes us back to that first campfire when we were first becoming social human beings. And also, if you're lucky, if you're one of the blessed ones whose parents read to them, it takes you back to bedtime and to the comfort and the love of that moment. So being read to is really, really important. I'll tell you another story about this. I did a reading group in a prison. We were reading Henry V, of all things. And I was speaking to one of the prisoners afterwards, and he said this thing that absolutely shook me. He said, I love the reading group because it's the only time in my life that I feel fully alert without feeling threatened. And what does fully alert mean? It means fully yourself. And without being threatened, that's because in that reading group, we didn't ask any questions. We didn't ask anything back in return. We did not ask questions or ask for feedback or anything like that. It was not transactional. We just read to them. Everybody loves being read to. Sometimes children look as though they might not want to be read to, but they do really. I'll tell you one last story. I was in a school in Glasgow at the end of the Edinburgh Book Festival, and it must have been the specialist school in testosterone because these boys were huge and menacing. And I read a bit from a book called Cosmic, and I left it on a cliffhanger. And I said, have you got any questions? And the first boy put his hand up and said, what happens next? And I said, well, we're running out of time. Got lots of other questions to get through. I'm glad you want to know what happens next. Pick up the book and read it, or even better, get your teacher to read it to the class. Next question. Can you read a bit more? Well, we're running out of time, but I'm glad you want to know what happens next. So why don't you ask your teacher to read it to the class? Because that's the ideal thing. Then everybody gets to read it. One more question. And this boy at the back of the class put his hands up. And I swear this boy was huge. He was like a postal district with arms. I swear he put his hand up and the weather changed. And he leaned forward and he went, would you just read, wee man? So I carried on reading. Carry on reading. And carry on reading to children. Share that wonderful experience. Have a great time, and I hope I see you during the year of reading.